It seems like everyone I talk to these days has their own podcasts.
Right.
It's incredible, but it makes you wonder, how did we get here? When did this whole podcasting thing really take off?
You know, people might be surprised to learn it's a relatively recent phenomenon.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Podcasting as we know it only gained traction in the early 2000s.
Wow. Okay, so paint a picture for me. Early 2000s. What was podcasting back then? What made it different from just, say, listening to the radio?
Think of it this way. What if you could listen to your favorite radio show anytime you wanted? Not just when it was live.
Right, right.
Like, what if you could download it and take it with you?
Oh.
That was the big idea. Total freedom and control over what you listen to and when.
So it was like the audio version of hitting record on your VCR,
Mm-hmm.
except way cooler because you could take it with you.
Exactly. And that's where the iPod comes in.
Ah, the iPod. Revolutionary.
Totally. Suddenly you could carry around a ton of music, audiobooks, and yeah, these new things called podcasts.
Because you could listen on the go.
Exactly. iPod plus broadcasting, you get podcasting. Catchy, right?
Super catchy, though I can listen to podcasts on just about anything these days.
Precisely. That's the beauty of it, right? It's not tied to any one device.
True, true. But even with the iPod and the whole idea of on-demand audio, something was still missing, wasn't it?
What do you mean?
How did people find new podcasts, let alone keep up with new episodes?
Ah, good point. This was before smartphones and notifications and all that.
Right, you couldn't just subscribe on an app.
Exactly. Back then, it was all about these things called RSS feeds. That's where it gets really interesting.
RSS feeds.
Yeah. RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication.
Okay.
Basically, instead of subscribing to a website or a show, you subscribe to its updates directly through this feed.
So new episodes would just magically show up.
Pretty much. They automatically download to your iPod. No more having to manually search for new episodes or worry about missing one.
Wow, that does sound kind of magical.
Right. It completely changed how people listened.
Yeah.
But then came iTunes, and that really shook things up.
Everyone knows iTunes for music, but what did they do for podcasts?
Think about it. Before iTunes, finding new podcasts was kind of a pain, right?
Yeah, I imagine you needed to know what you were looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You had to be somewhat tech-savvy to figure out how to subscribe using RSS feeds.
Not exactly user-friendly.
Not at all. But in 2005, Apple integrates podcasts into iTunes. And boom.
Podcasts were mainstream.
Exactly. Suddenly, podcasts were right there alongside music, and audiobooks easy to find, easy to subscribe to. It was a game changer, both for listeners and creators.
Wow, so iTunes was like the Netflix of podcasting. It made everything accessible.
A perfect comparison. It was like flipping a switch. It opened the floodgates.
And then came Serial.
Yeah.
Serial. Okay, now we're talking. Serial. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Everyone was talking about
I
it.
just can't quite place it. Help me out here.
2014. Serial drops, and suddenly everyone is obsessed with true crime.
Oh, right. I remember now. It was like a cultural moment. What was it about Serial in particular, though? Why did that show, out of all of them, become such a phenomenon?
It was this perfectly crafted, long-form narrative. Nobody had really done that before in such a captivating way. Before Serial, you mostly had these episodic podcasts, right? You could listen in any order.
Right, right.
But Serial was different. They took this one true crime story, a single case, and stretched it out over multiple episodes week after week.
Creating this tune in next week kind of suspense.
Exactly. It was like a TV drama unfolding in your ears, except it was real.
Yeah.
Real people, a real crime, and everyone listening was trying to piece it together.
So it wasn't just about the case itself. It was the storytelling, the suspense, the way it was produced. Everything just sucked you in.
Precisely. And it proved that people craved that kind of deep, immersive listening experience.
And I feel like that's when we saw the rise of all these different podcast genres, right? Serial sort of opened the floodgates.
Absolutely. True crime obviously blew up, thanks in no small part to Serial. But we also saw this explosion of narrative podcasts across all these other genres, fiction, history, even investigative journalism.
Because podcasts could actually do those topics justice.
Right, exactly. They provided this space for nuance and complexity.
Which is incredible when you think about it. It's like podcasting created a whole new way to tell stories.
Yeah.
But it's not all murder mysteries and deep dives, right? What about all the other genres out there?
Oh, there's a podcast for everyone, trust me. Comedy is huge. The Joe Rogan Experience, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. I mean, those shows have massive followings.
What is it about those shows, though? I feel like people either love them or hate them.
It's that casual conversational vibe. Makes you feel like you're hanging out with friends, just listening in on their conversation.
Okay, I can see that.
And then you've got your educational podcast, perfect if you want to learn something new while you're, say, walking the dog, stuff you should know, TED Talks Daily. Those are classics.
It's amazing how much information they pack into each episode.
I know, right? Like having a lecture series on demand, anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. Okay, what else? We've got true crime, comedy, educational.
You can't forget about the interview and conversation podcasts. Shows like the Tim Ferriss Show, Armchair Expert. They have these amazing conversations with fascinating people, authors, entrepreneurs, you name it.
It's like getting a peek behind the curtain.
Yes. They get into the nitty-gritty, the behind-the-scenes stuff you wouldn't hear anywhere else. And then, of course, you have the whole world of audio dramas.
Oh, right. Those are like movies for your ears.
Exactly. Shows like Welcome to Night Vale, The Truth, they're so immersive. They create these incredibly rich sound worlds that just pull you in.
It's wild how far podcasting has come. Okay, but with all these different genres and formats, what makes a podcast truly successful? What's the secret sauce?
$1 million question, right? The article we're looking at suggests a really interesting exercise, actually. Basically, they want you to analyze your favorite podcasts.
Analyze. Like, break them down.
Yeah, exactly. Reverse engineer what makes them so good.
I like it. Figure out what makes them tick.
Right. So think about it. The podcasts you listen to religiously, the ones you can't wait for new episodes of, what is it about those specific shows?
Interesting. The host, for sure. If the host isn't engaging, I'm probably not going to stick around.
Huge factor. What else?
Well, the topic has to be interesting to me, obviously. But even with a great topic, the production quality matters.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody wants to listen to a podcast with terrible audio quality.
It's like, if you're not putting in the effort, why should I bother listening?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you've got the host, the content itself, production quality.
And how often they release new episodes.
Yes. Consistency is key.
Because if I'm constantly checking for new episodes and they're never there.
You're going to lose interest.
Exactly.
So the article breaks down podcast success into these key ingredients: content, host, production quality, and frequency. And they use the daily as an example, which I think is really interesting.
The daily, okay, yeah, that's the New York Times one, right?
That's the one. And they're a perfect example of how consistency pays off.
How so?
Well, they put out a new episode every weekday morning. Like clockwork.
So you always know when to expect it.
Exactly. It's that reliability that keeps people coming back.
Makes sense. But there are a ton of news podcasts out there. What makes the daily stand out content-wise?
Well, they consistently deliver really high-quality journalism, insightful commentary, they get some big-name interviews, and they manage to pack it all into about 20, 30 minutes.
Which is perfect for people like me who, don't have time to listen to hour-long podcasts.
Right. They get straight to the point.
Exactly.
And they don't shy away from complex topics either. They'll break down anything: international conflicts, domestic policy, you name it.
And they make it engaging.
Oh, yeah. They're really good at explaining things in a clear, concise way.
So if we're using the daily as a model for podcast success, what have we learned? Well, they've nailed the key ingredients, right? They've got a clear, niche, daily news analysis. They've got a strong host, high production value, and a consistent release schedule. That's huge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I imagine what works for a news podcast might not work for, say, a comedy podcast or an audio drama, right?
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about podcasting. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
It's all about finding what works for you and your audience.
Precisely. And that's why this whole exercise of analyzing your favorite podcast is so valuable.
Because it makes you a more active listener.
Totally. It's not just about being entertained. It's about understanding the elements that make a podcast successful.
Which is something you can apply to your own life, whether you're starting a podcast or just trying to be more discerning about the content you consume.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about appreciating the craft.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of podcasting. We've covered a lot of ground today: the history, the genres, the elements of a successful show, and hopefully given our listeners a lot to think about.
Exactly. So until next time, keep exploring, keep listening, and who knows, maybe we'll see you out there in the podcastosphere.
That's right. You never know what you might create.